Hello, my oodles and noodles. We have returned yet again, somehow, to speaketh more of bookeths. Does that make sense? I really need to find an old English teacher, someone to really embody and show me how to speaketh as they did in the olden days. It's never gonna happen, people. I'm not that motivated. So, let's get back on track. We are getting back on track. Making a beeline. Why is it called a beeline? Why? No one... A to B, I guess? I just figured that one out. Okay. Focusing. We are going to discuss whether or not book series can get too long. It's something that I really have been pondering about lately as I've gone through certain series and realized that many times at a certain point, authors can kind of get caught in the trap of their mind. They really want to delve into a story and they really want to flesh things out, and they start confusing, at least for me, they start confusing world building with adding way too many characters and miscellaneous details that don't really serve any purpose. I actually, to throw it into game land, I find this is one of the weakest points of the Elder Scrolls series. I mean, the Elder Scrolls, for anyone who knows, is one of the most famous single-player campaign series that has been going on for years. So this entire world has been developed through multiple games, and in each one of the most popular aspects is this exploration. There's so much there, which is a great thing because it really gives you this sense of exploration, this sense of adventure. But unfortunately, for me, almost every single Elder Scrolls game, the stories kind of are lacking. So they add so much detail to the world, little knickknacks everywhere, but they kind of fall through on what's supposed to be drawing you into the world in the first place, which is the story itself. It is what your character, what you, who is embodying that character, is supposed to be involved in. And they fall short, unfortunately, on that a lot, especially, let's not even get into their action combat. I can't handle Elder Scrolls for that. It's terrible. So we're moving back into the book realm, and you see this a lot in longer series, especially longer series that have quite a few characters. I have read some longer series that really hyper focus on one, maybe sometimes two or three main characters, and even though the series is longer, because you kind of zoom in and you have this foundation of main characters that there was only a few, you can kind of stay, even if the author adds in a lot of extraneous detail around, you are always still focused on your main characters. But as soon as you start going out from that, when you start having 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then we're speaking of in terms of just main characters, but there's many larger book series which might have, let's say, 5 or 6 main characters, but there's still a lot of effort and time that's put into sometimes a dozen or more side characters. And this can be pleasant in some ways. It can really flesh out the story, but in others, sometimes it just drags. It drags. For example, Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan, and of course finalized by Brandon Sanderson. I mean, it is an incredible series. Don't get me wrong. Wheel of Time is phenomenal. I grew up with Wheel of Time. It is what got me into epic fantasy in the first place. It's really what drew me into fantasy overall. I mean, I started reading the Wheel of Time when I was like 7, I think, because my uncle and my mother had already read it. It was kind of like a family affair, and it was fantastic. But by book 8 or so, Robert really started to meander. He started to go off and start detailing out characters, sometimes characters we had never even been introduced to before or had been introduced to at such a low level. And it's not as though by introducing those characters in greater depth, he added to the story. He didn't flesh anything out. They were just more detail to a world that was already brimming with detail. And I don't know about you, but at a certain point, my brain can only handle so much information. And for a series like The Wheel of Time, which is something like 15 books, each one over 600 pages long, it starts to get a little bit too much. You're trying to hold all these disparate facts and all the small details and side characters, which really flesh out the main characters, which were there were already many main characters within the book series. And so when Robert started going off on these tangents and adding details that didn't need to be there, it's not to say that it was horrendous. It was never bad. It's not like I was reading these parts and going, oh my God, this is so terrible. It's more so the fact that I was reading this and go, this really doesn't need to be here. And I'm exhausted trying to, like, I gotta shove another character's information into my head, and this character does nothing. It doesn't add to the other main characters. It doesn't add to the overall plot. It's really not doing much of anything. And so to go back to the original question, can book series get too long? I think the better way, even for myself to say it, is, can authors unfortunately spend too much time detailing out their world and adding pages and pages and sometimes chapters and chapters to a book series that don't need to be there? And I think the answer is definitely yes. And I think anyone who's read The Wheel of Time, even the most hardcore fans, you could say books 8 to 10, unfortunately, they kind of drag a little bit because of this. Robert got a little stuck around there and really shouldn't have. And this does happen a little bit throughout the entire series as well. I could say, what's another good example of a series? I mean, something like, for any sci-fi fans out there who kind of like a little mix, if you haven't read the Prince Roger series, which is March Up Country, March of the Stars. It's a 4-book series. It's fantastic, actually. I got to reread it and do a review of it. But March Up Country follows this royal prince who's sent out on a little diplomatic mission just to say hello to one of their colonies, and his ship gets sabotaged. They crash land on this basically sometimes hunter-gatherer, sometime industrial age level planet where they have to traverse across it, and it's really fantastic. It's a great series, and it is a military sci-fi, and in this series there's a lot of detail that is spent on obviously describing weaponry and how things are done, which is great if you're interested in that. And I have a decent amount of interest in it, so it was pretty fun to do. But sometimes, again, bogging down in information, sometimes there's too much detail. Sometimes things that could have taken 1 chapter took 5. So there's different ways that authors can kind of get caught up in their own stuff. And as a reader, someone who reads, sometimes you're just in the mood for what I would call a lighter novel. And sometimes you're in the mood for big philosophical ideas. And there's everything in between. But regardless of what your mood and how that's affecting your reading, sometimes I really do feel like authors just push it. They push it too much, and I think it's because, sort of like in anime where we add in fillers kind of waiting for the main story plot to advance within a manga, authors kind of get a little stuck sometimes. They're not sure how to advance things, and so they add in this fluff. And maybe they're not doing it consciously, but unfortunately it is a problem. Now, there are some longer series that I haven't felt have really suffered from this. For example, Brandon Sanders's Stormlight Archives is only at 4 books now, but I mean, every single book is 1,000 pages long. So it is a huge series, and I have not felt any fluff. That's not to say there weren't parts that I didn't enjoy or that I found kind of stupid, but I never felt like there was any fluff added in. Every chapter is meant to be there. When characters who are not the main characters were added in, detail was gone into, but never so much detail that you're like, okay, I don't need to know this. When detail was added in about military work or magic or anything like that, it was never too much. It was just the right amount, at least for me. And so there are a balance. There's even, granted, I've read book series which are 1 or 2 books long that had too much fluff inside of it before, and that's why I didn't really get into them, because there was just detail that didn't need to be there. I did a review of the Magician's Impossible book, which is just a standalone novel, and I felt there was a lot of wasted material in there. There was things that were added in that didn't need to be there. And so I really believe that it is better in much the same way a journalist is trained to remove uh, detail that doesn't need to be there, use simpler wording. I mean, for sure, to be understanding, a fantasy novel, especially, but just writing in general, a novel, I mean, prose and adding in more detail, especially just to add beauty and depth to a story, is completely different than a journalistic piece. But I do think a lot of authors could take uh, uh, a little bit of advice from journalists who do know how to kind of cut out the swath. And I mean, this is why editing is so important. I mean, I really, really have come to appreciate the concept of editors. I've heard a lot of people who I really respect talk about them, and a lot of the ideas that they're pushing forward in terms of how a book could be, let's say, a 9 on 10, but instead it's a 6 on 10 because the editor didn't get in there and knock the author on the head and go, hey, this is a little bit too much. We need to cut this out. We need to bring this forward. Like you're getting ahead of yourselves. You're going on tangents that don't need to be there. That is the job of the editor. So the editor is the journalist, is the person who's coming in and going, this is bad spelling. This doesn't make sense. Why are you wasting our time with that? And of course, beta readers do this also. So really, really, when series are getting too long, when they are going off to places they shouldn't be, that's why it's super important for authors to get this help. Get beta readers, get friends who understand this stuff, get an editor, get multiple editors, because obviously not every editor is good. So think about that. And I think it's really important for people who are big readers to understand this also, because the choices we make and the comments we leave, we're going into 2021 now, and the whole entire landscape of how the interaction between us as readers and authors is going to hugely change in the future. I mean, many authors, such as Brandon Sanderson, now have, they have social media accounts, they're making YouTube channels, they're really, really interacting with their fans. And so when you find an author who you really enjoy, you can actually talk to them. You can leave them feedback. They can get huge amounts of feedback from us. And so the better we are at expressing what we like and don't like, the better those authors will get, and other new authors will learn from past authors who've learned this, and the cycle continues, and we're just going to get better and better and better books, because there is a lot of, unfortunately, crap that gets put out there. The digital age is amazing because there's a lot of people who don't have the ability or the want to work through publishers and whatnot who are going to start making books, who are making books. I mean, I just finished off, in a sense, I just went through a 4-book series called The King's Dark Tidings. I'm going to be making a review of all of the series. I love the books. It's by this woman, Calcade. She's really, really awesome. But she only posts her stuff digitally. It's on Amazon, and that's it. There is no paperback. And so all this is changing how authors are interacting and selling their work and producing stuff. And so we're going to be able to really change things and make really great works going forward. So reader or writer, keep it in mind. Got to stay focused. Don't go off, and make sure to get some good editing done. Need to edit my mouth. That's what we need to do. Okay, this is 14 minutes long. We're going to leave it at that. I love you all. Please comment, like, subscribe. Let me know what you think. Check out the website, geektales.ca. And have a great weekend. And I hope you're not in quarantine like we are again over here. Peace.